The grand hall of the celestial spire shimmered like a dream carved from moonlight and memory. Pillars of living crystal pulsed with soft bioluminescence, casting shifting patterns across walls woven from starlight-threaded silk. At the center of this ethereal chamber stood Commander Joran Vale, boots scuffed from the desert skirmishes he'd just survived, his uniform still dusted with the red sands of Xylo's prime. He wasn't supposed to be here, not in the heart of the Varelian royal palace, not standing before the sovereign court of the Emerald Throne. But war had a way of rewriting protocol, and Joran had just delivered something far more valuable than victory. The life of Princess Lysara Vale. She sat upon a low dais draped in iridescent moss fabric, her posture regal yet subtly unsteady. Her skin was the deep green of forest canopies after rain, smooth and luminous, and her hair, long, flowing, and impossibly white, spilled over her shoulders like frozen starlight. Her eyes, large and almond-shaped, glowed faintly amber, the pupils slitted like a cat's. She'd been wounded during the ambush on the Skyward Pass, a plasma bolt searing through her left shoulder. Joran had carried her for 3 leagues through enemy territory, shielding her body with his own, whispering reassurances in broken Varelian until she lost consciousness. Now, healed by palace medics but still weak, she watched him with an unreadable expression, one that flickered between gratitude, curiosity, and something else entirely. Joran cleared his throat, adjusting his tunic. He'd rehearsed a dozen formal addresses in his head during the shuttle ride up from the surface, but now, under the weight of her gaze and the silent scrutiny of the courtiers lining the hall, tall, elegant beings with skin tones ranging from jade to emerald, all with that same cascade of white hair, he felt absurdly out of place. His hands were calloused, his voice rough from shouting orders over artillery fire, and his sense of humor had always leaned toward the irreverent. Protocol demanded solemnity. His instincts demanded honesty. So he stepped forward, ignoring the gasps of the court, and offered a small, lopsided smile. "Hello, Cutie," he said, voice warm and low, as if they were alone in a quiet room instead of surrounded by the most powerful beings in the Varelian dominion. The effect was instantaneous. Princess Lysara's cheeks flushed a shade so vivid it nearly matched the crimson embroidery on her ceremonial robe. Her glowing eyes widened, then darted away, then flicked back to him with a mixture of shock and something dangerously close to delight. A soft, breathy sound escaped her lips, half protest, half giggle, and she quickly covered her mouth with one slender hand, her fingers trembling slightly. The court erupted into a hushed symphony of whispers. One elder advisor dropped his ceremonial staff with a clatter. Another fainted outright, collapsing onto a pile of velvet cushions with a muffled thud. Joran blinked. He hadn't expected that. Too forward?" he muttered, rubbing the back of his neck. Lysara finally found her voice, though it came out softer than usual, tinged with both amusement and flustered indignation. "Commander Vale, you address a princess of the Emerald bloodline as Cutie?" "Well," Joran said, shrugging, "you're sitting there looking like a moonbeam dipped in jade, and I just spent 3 days carrying you through sandstorms and sniper fire while you mumbled poetry in your sleep. Your Highness feels a bit stiff, don't you think?" A ripple of laughter ran through the younger courtiers, quickly stifled by stern glares from their elders. But Lysara didn't reprimand him. Instead, the flush deepened, spreading down her neck, and the corners of her lips twitched upward. "You remember what I said in my fever? Mostly nonsense about singing rivers and silver-winged serpents," Joran admitted. "But there was one part. You called me my anchor in the storm. That stuck with me." Silence fell again, heavier this time. Lysara stared at him, her amber eyes searching his face as if trying to decipher a riddle written in human skin. In Varelian culture, such intimate phrases were reserved for betrothals or soul-bound pairs. To speak them unconsciously, and for a human to recall them, was either a profound accident or a sign of something deeper. Before she could respond, the massive doors at the far end of the hall groaned open. A figure strode in, tall and imposing, clad in armor forged from blackened meteorite and etched with constellations. Queen Velana, Lysara's mother, ruler of the Varelian dominion, entered with the grace of a predator and the presence of a storm. Her green skin was darker, weathered by centuries of rule, and her white hair was braided tightly around a crown of obsidian and living vines. Her eyes locked onto Joran immediately, sharp and assessing. "Commander Vale," she said, her voice resonating like distant thunder. "You have returned my daughter to me. For that, the Dominion owes you a debt no treasure can repay." Joran bowed deeply, the soldier in him snapping to attention despite his earlier informality. "Your Majesty, I only did what any decent person would do." "Decency is rare in war," the Queen replied, stepping closer. "Rarer still among humans, if our histories are to be believed." She paused, studying him. "Yet you carried her when you could have left her. You shielded her when you could have saved yourself. And now, you stand before her court and call her Cutie, as if she were a barmaid in some frontier tavern." Joran met her gaze without flinching. "I meant no disrespect, only honesty." Queen Velana's lips curved into the faintest hint of a smile. "Honesty is dangerous, cuts through lies like a blade through silk. My daughter has lived her life wrapped in silk. Protocol, expectation, silence. Perhaps it is time she felt the edge of truth." Lysara looked between them, her blush fading into something more thoughtful, more vulnerable. "Mother!" The Queen raised a hand, silencing her gently. "There is more, Commander. While you were retrieving my daughter, our scouts intercepted a transmission from the Cthar hegemony. They know you aided us. They know you defied their blockade. And they have declared you an enemy of their expansion. Your ship, the Iron Sparrow, has been marked for destruction. Your homeworld may soon be targeted." Joran's stomach dropped. He'd known the risks, but hearing it confirmed was different. Still, he squared his shoulders. "Then I'll fight them. Again." "You will not fight alone," Lysara said suddenly, her voice firmer now. She rose from her dais, swaying slightly but holding herself upright. "The Varelian Dominion does not abandon its allies. And you are more than an ally now." The Queen nodded slowly. "Indeed, which brings me to the matter of recompense. Tradition demands we offer you land, title, or wealth. But I suspect such things hold little appeal for a man who calls princesses Cutie in royal courts." Joran managed a dry chuckle. "I've got a bunk on a rust bucket freighter and a pension that barely covers synth coffee. Titles don't keep you warm at night." "No," the Queen agreed. "But bonds do." She turned to her daughter. "Lysara, you have spoken of the commander's courage, of his kindness, of the way he hummed old earth lullabies to calm your pain." She paused. Lysara's eyes widened again, but this time there was no embarrassment, only a dawning realization and a spark of hope. "Mother, you cannot mean—" "I mean," Queen Velana said, turning back to Joran, "that the Varelian way of honoring a true protector is through union. Not political alliance, but heart-deep bond. If you are willing, Commander Vale, my daughter offers you her hand, not as a prize, but as a partner, as equals beneath the twin moons." Joran's breath caught. He looked at Lysara, really looked at her. The intelligence in her eyes, the quiet strength in her posture, the way her fingers now twisted nervously in the fabric of her robe. He remembered how she'd gripped his arm in the desert, whispering, "Don't leave me," and how he'd promised, "Not ever." He hadn't known then that those words would echo in a palace of light and crystal. He began, then stopped. He wasn't a poet. He wasn't a diplomat. But he was honest. "I don't know your customs. I don't speak your language well. I snore. I burn toast. And I once accidentally set a mess hall on fire trying to impress a girl with flambéed protein cubes." A genuine laugh burst from Lysara, bright and clear like wind chimes. "And I talk in my sleep, hate the taste of water, and once turned my tutor's hair permanently violet because I misread a spell scroll." Joran grinned. "Sounds like we're both disasters." "Perhaps," Lysara said, stepping down from the dais and walking toward him, her bare feet silent on the polished floor. "But maybe, together, we could be a beautiful kind of disaster. The queen watched them, her expression unreadable, but her eyes held a warmth that hadn't been there before. The choice is yours, Commander. But know this, if you accept, you will not only gain a wife. You will gain a people, a home, and enemies who will move stars to destroy you. Joran looked into Lysara's eyes, seeing not just an alien princess, but a woman who'd faced death and still chose to smile, who blushed at nicknames and dreamed of singing rivers, who saw past his rough edges to something worth keeping. I've spent my life fighting for causes I barely understood, he said quietly. For flags, for orders, for survival. But this feels like fighting for something real, for someone real. He took her hand, cool and smooth against his rough palm, and gave it a gentle squeeze. Yes, he said, I accept. Lysara's smile bloomed like a flower in dawn light, and she squeezed back. Good, because I already told the royal chef to prepare your favorite earth dish for tonight's banquet. Joran raised an eyebrow. Which is? Macaroni and cheese, she said proudly. I read about it in your personnel file. Said it was the only thing that made basic training bearable. He laughed, the sound echoing warmly in the vast hall. You're terrifyingly thorough. And you, she said, leaning closer, her voice dropping to a whisper only he could hear, are utterly impossible. Before he could retort, alarms blared through the palace. A deep, resonant wail that vibrated in the bones. Red emergency lights pulsed along the crystal pillars. A guard burst into the hall, breathless. Your Majesty, Cthar dreadnoughts have breached the outer perimeter. They're targeting the palace shields. Chaos erupted. Courtiers scattered. The queen's expression hardened into battle readiness. But Lysara didn't let go of Joran's hand. We have a wedding to plan, she said, eyes blazing with determination. And I won't let anyone crash it. Joran grinned, the soldier in him rising to the surface. Then let's give them a reception they'll never forget. He turned to the queen. Your Majesty, permission to command the palace defense grid? Queen Velana studied him for a long moment, then nodded. Granted, Commander, and welcome to the family. What followed was a whirlwind of strategy and steel. Joran, drawing on years of tactical experience, coordinated with Varelian generals in the war room beneath the palace, his human intuition blending with their alien tech in unexpected ways. Lysara, though still recovering, insisted on joining him, her knowledge of Varelian systems compensating for his lack of familiarity. Together, they rerouted shield harmonics, overloaded enemy targeting arrays with harmonic feedback, and launched a swarm of cloaked skiffs to disable the dreadnought's main cannons. In the heat of battle, amidst flashing consoles and shouted orders, Joran found himself glancing at Lysara more than once, watching the fierce concentration on her face, the way her white hair clung to her damp neck, the quiet confidence she radiated even when exhausted. And each time their eyes met, she gave him that small, secret smile, the one that said, "We're in this together." When the last Cthar ship retreated, trailing smoke and shattered pride, the palace erupted in cheers. But Joran didn't join the celebration. He found Lysara on the observation balcony, gazing out at the stars, her arms wrapped around herself against the cool night air. "You okay?" he asked, stepping beside her. She nodded, then leaned her head against his shoulder. "Just thinking, how strange it is. A week ago I was leading a diplomatic convoy, bored out of my mind. Now I'm engaged to a human who calls me Cutie, and just helped save my world." "Strange times," Joran agreed, "but good strange." She looked up at him, her amber eyes glowing softly in the starlight. "The best kind." He wrapped an arm around her, pulling her close. "You know, back on Earth, there's an old saying, when the universe gives you a green-skinned, white-haired princess who blushes at nicknames, you don't question it. You just hold on tight." Lysara laughed, the sound mingling with the distant chime of victory bells. "That's not a real saying. It is now," he said, pressing a kiss to her forehead. And as the twin moons of Varelles rose over the spires of the palace, casting silver light over the city below, two souls, one human, one alien, stood together, not as soldier and princess, but as partners. The war wasn't over. The galaxy was still vast and dangerous. But for the first time in a long time, neither of them felt alone. In the days that followed, preparations for the bonding ceremony began in earnest. The palace buzzed with activity. Tailors crafting a hybrid uniform that blended human military lines with Varelian elegance. Botanists cultivating earth flowers alongside native star blooms. Chefs experimenting with fusion cuisine that somehow made macaroni taste even better with crystalline sauce. Joran endured endless fittings, diplomatic briefings, and awkward conversations with Lysara's many aunts, all of whom seemed determined to test his resolve with increasingly bizarre questions. Can you recite the 17 verses of the Song of Binding while juggling? Do you know the proper way to braid mourning vines? Through it all, Lysara was his anchor. She translated ancient customs, smoothed over cultural misunderstandings, and once dragged him away from a particularly tedious council meeting by pretending he'd been summoned for an emergency cheese tasting. But beneath the joy and chaos, tension simmered. Scouts reported increased Cthar activity near the neutral zones. Rumors spread of a secret weapon, a planet cracker capable of shattering worlds. And whispers reached the Palace of Descent within the Dominion itself. Nobles who believed allying with a human was a betrayal of Varelian purity. One evening, as they walked through the palace gardens, where trees bore fruit that glowed like lanterns and streams sang in harmonic frequencies, Lysara grew quiet. "What's wrong?" Joran asked, sensing the shift. She stopped beneath a canopy of silver leaves, her expression troubled. "Some of the high houses, they say our union is a mistake, that you are a temporary distraction, a human curiosity, that when the war ends you'll grow tired of us, of me." Joran turned to face her, cupping her face in his hands. "Listen to me, Lysara. I didn't carry you through hell because you're exotic. I did it because you're you. Brave, brilliant, stubborn, and yes, ridiculously cute when you're flustered." He smiled softly. "I'm not going anywhere, not after finding you." Tears welled in her eyes, but she blinked them away, returning his smile. "Good, because I've already picked out names for our children." "Oh God!" Joran groaned playfully. "Please tell me they're not all Moon Whisper or Star Blossom." "One of them is Zephyr," she admitted. "Zephyr Vale." He considered it. "Actually, I kind of love it." She kissed him then, under the singing trees, her lips cool and sweet like nectar. And in that moment, surrounded by alien beauty and human hope, Joran knew he'd found not just a new home, but a new purpose. The night before the bonding ceremony, Joran stood alone on the palace ramparts, staring up at the stars. He thought of his old life, lonely, drifting, defined by duty without meaning. And now he had someone who blushed when he called her Cutie, who fought beside him, who dreamed of a future with him, a soft footfall behind him. He didn't need to turn to know who it was. "Couldn't sleep?" Lysara asked, joining him at the edge. "Too much to think about," he admitted. "Tomorrow changes everything." "It already has," she said, taking his hand. "From the moment you said, 'Hello, Cutie,' my world tilted on its axis." He chuckled. "Mine too." They stood in silence for a while, watching the stars well overhead. Then Lysara leaned her head on his shoulder. "Promise me something? Anything. No matter what comes. War, politics, angry ants with vine-braiding exams. You'll always call me that. Just once in a while. When it's just us." Joran pressed a kiss to her hair. "Always, Cutie." And as the first light of dawn touched the spires of the celestial spire, painting the sky in hues of rose and gold, two hearts beat as one. Human and alien, soldier and princess, bound not by duty, but by something far more powerful. Love, laughter, and the quiet courage to build a future together. One impossible, beautiful moment at a time. The morning of the bonding ceremony dawned with an unnatural stillness. The twin moons of Varelis had set hours ago, yet the sky remained choked with a thick, violet haze that clung to the spires like morning shrouds. Joran stood at the edge of the ceremonial balcony, his new uniform, deep emerald trimmed in silver, stitched with both human insignia and Varelian glyphs, feeling heavier than armor. He'd barely slept, not from nerves, but from the gnawing sense that something was wrong. The silence was too complete. No birdsong from the crystal groves. No hum from the palace's ambient energy fields. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Lysara found him there, radiant in her ceremonial robes woven from living moon moss that shimmered with every step. Her white hair was braided with threads of starlight, and around her neck hung the heartstone of Vale, a palm-sized gem said to pulse in time with the royal bloodline. But her smile didn't reach her eyes. "You feel it too," she said quietly, joining him at the railing. Joran nodded, like the calm before a storm that never comes. Before she could reply, the palace alarms blared. Not the deep wail of external attack, but the sharp, staccato shriek of internal breach. Red emergency glyphs flared across the walls. Guards sprinted past, weapons drawn. A messenger skidded to a halt before them, panting. "Your Highness, Commander, the Heartstone. It's been tampered with. The resonance frequency is destabilizing. If it fractures during the ceremony, the psychic backlash could kill everyone in the chamber." Lysara's hand flew to the gem at her throat. "Impossible. Only members of the royal bloodline can attune to it. Unless," Joran said slowly, "someone used a genetic mimic, a clone strand, or a blood relative." A cold dread settled over them both. There was only one other living heir with enough royal blood to bypass the Heartstone's safeguards. Prince Darren, Lysara's exiled half-brother, banished years ago for attempting to poison their mother. He'd vanished into the Outer Rim, rumored to be working with the Cthar. "He's here," Lysara whispered. As if summoned, a figure emerged from the shadowed archway at the far end of the balcony. Tall, lean, with the same green skin and white hair as Lysara, but his eyes were cold, empty pits. Prince Darren wore no armor, only a dark traveler's cloak, but the plasma dagger at his hip glowed faintly with stolen palace energy. "Sister," he said, voice smooth as poisoned honey. "You look lovely, almost worth letting you live." Lysara stepped forward, shielding Joran instinctively. "Darren, you betrayed our family, our people. Why return now?" "To finish what I started," he said, drawing the dagger. "The Cthar promised me the throne if I delivered you, and your human pet, to them. But I realized, why share power when I can have it all?" He smirked. "I've already sabotaged the planetary defense grid. The Cthar fleet is waiting just beyond the asteroid belt. Once the Heartstone implodes during your little love fest, the palace shields will collapse. They'll sweep in and claim everything." Joran's mind raced. The ceremony was in less than an hour. Thousands would gather in the Grand Hall. If the Heartstone detonated, "You won't get away with this," Lysara said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. Darren laughed. "Who's going to stop me? You? Still weak from your desert wounds? Or your human toy, who doesn't even know how to hold a proper blade?" In one swift motion, he lunged. Not at Lysara, but at Joran, aiming to cut him down and break her spirit. But Joran had spent years surviving ambushes. He sidestepped, grabbed Darren's wrist, and twisted hard. The dagger clattered to the floor. They grappled, rolling across the balcony, crashing into ornamental vines. Darren was stronger than he looked, fueled by fanaticism and alien physiology. He slammed Joran against the railing, his fingers closing around his throat. "Humans are fragile," Darren hissed. "One snap, and your story ends." But Joran wasn't alone. With a cry of fury, Lysara leapt onto her brother's back, wrapping her arms around his neck. She pressed her palm against the Heartstone at her own chest, and pushed. A pulse of raw psychic energy erupted from the gem, not outward, but inward into Darren. He screamed as ancestral memories flooded his mind. Their mother singing lullabies, their father's last words before the assassination. The moment he'd slipped poison into the queen's wine and watched her collapse. The Heartstone didn't just store power, it stored truth. And truth was a weapon. Darren staggered back, clutching his head, eyes wide with horror. "No, I didn't. I was wrong." But the moment of vulnerability passed. Rage twisted his face again. "You always ruined everything," he snarled, and activated a hidden device on his wrist. The balcony floor beneath them shimmered, then vanished. They fell, not to the ground, but through a rift in space-time, yanked into a swirling vortex of fractured light. Joran grabbed Lysara's hand as reality tore apart around them. The last thing he saw was the palace spire shrinking into the distance. Then darkness. They landed hard on cold metal, gasping. Around them stretched a vast, dimly lit chamber lined with humming machinery and rows of stasis pods. Some empty, others containing motionless figures with green skin and white hair. The air smelled of ozone and decay. "The old royal vault," Lysara whispered, pushing herself up. "Beneath the palace. Darren must have reactivated the emergency teleporter." Joran scanned the room. "He's here somewhere." As if on cue, Darren stepped from behind a bank of consoles, holding a control rod that pulsed with unstable energy. "You're too late," he said, voice ragged but triumphant. "The Heartstone's resonance is already syncing with the vault's core. In 10 minutes, it overloads. The explosion will vaporize the palace, and everyone in it." Lysara's eyes darted to the central console. "You've linked it to the geothermal taps. That's insane. It'll crack the planet's crust. Better a dead world than one ruled by humans." Darren spat. Joran's gaze fell on the stasis pods. One bore a faded nameplate. Empress Celera Vale, preserved in honor. Lysara's grandmother. Legend said she'd sacrificed herself to seal the vault during the first schism. An idea sparked. "Lysara," he said urgently, "can the Heartstone interface with the vault's AI?" "Yes, but trust me." He turned to Darren. "You think you're avenging Varelli's? You're destroying it. Your ancestors built this place to protect us, not bury us." Darren hesitated just for a second. But it was enough. Joran charged. Not at Darren, but past him, toward the Empress's pod. He slammed his fist against the release panel. With a hiss of steam, the lid slid open. Inside lay the mummified form of Empress Celera, her hands clasped over a small, obsidian data crystal. Lysara understood instantly. She sprinted to the main console, jamming the crystal into the port. "Grandmother's final command protocol. It overrides all current inputs." Darren roared and fired his plasma pistol. The bolt seared past Joran's shoulder, scorching the wall. Joran tackled him, driving him to the ground. They wrestled for the weapon, sparks flying as the control rod clattered away. Above them, the vault's lights flickered red. Countdown 3 minutes. Lysara's fingers flew over the console. "I need to reroute the overload into the stasis field, but it'll require a living royal blood signature to stabilize." "I'm not royal," Joran panted, elbowing Darren in the jaw. "But you're bonded to me," Lysara said, meeting his eyes. "In Varelian law, your life force is tied to mine. If I channel through you, it might work." "It's suicide?" Darren gasped, blood trickling from his lip. "The feedback will burn you both alive." "Then we go together," Joran said, standing and offering his hand to Lysara. She took it without hesitation. They placed their palms on the central node. Lysara closed her eyes and began to chant. An ancient binding verse, the same one she'd murmured in the desert. The Heartstone blazed like a captured star. Energy surged through them, white-hot and agonizing. Joran gritted his teeth, feeling his nerves scream, his vision whiting out. Beside him, Lysara trembled, tears streaming down her face. But she didn't let go. The overload reversed. Instead of exploding outward, the energy collapsed inward, funneling into the stasis field. The pods glowed softly, then powered down. The countdown halted at 0:07. Silence. Darren lay unconscious, drained by the psychic backlash. The vault was safe. Joran collapsed to his knees, gasping. Lysara slumped against him, exhausted but alive. Their hands were still clasped, scorched and blistered, but unbroken. Hours later, they emerged from the vault to a palace in chaos and celebration. The ceremony had been delayed, but not cancelled. Word had spread. The commander and the princess had saved them all. Queen Velana met them at the vault entrance, her eyes glistening. Without a word, she embraced them both. The bonding ceremony took place that evening under the twin moons, bathed in soft light. No grand hall this time, just the palace gardens with close friends and loyal guards as witnesses. When the officiant asked if anyone objected, a single bird sang from the crystal trees. No one else dared. After the vows, as the guests cheered and the musicians played a fusion of earth folk tunes and Varelian harmonics, Joran leaned close to Lysara. "Still think I'm a disaster?" he murmured. She smiled, her cheeks flushed. Not from embarrassment this time, but from joy. The most beautiful kind. But as they danced beneath the stars, Joran noticed something strange. The heartstone at Lysara's neck was cracked. Not shattered, but webbed with fine lines, pulsing erratically. And deep in the vault, in the shadows no one had checked, one stasis pod began to hum back to life. The war wasn't over. It had only just begun. In the weeks that followed, Joran and Lysara worked tirelessly to root out the last remnants of Darren's conspiracy, uncovering a hidden Cthar listening post buried beneath the palace gardens. With the heartstone stabilized through a fusion of human biotech and Varelian resonance weaving, the crack in its core became a symbol, not of fragility, but of resilience. The rogue stasis pod was found empty, its occupant long gone, but intelligence confirmed Prince Darren had been captured by Cthar defectors who sought peace, not conquest. Queen Velana, moved by her daughter's courage and Joran's unwavering loyalty, declared a new era of unity between humans and Varelians, opening embassies on Earth and inviting human scientists, artists, and farmers to settle in the outer provinces. Joran, now officially titled Royal Consort and Defense Strategist, traded his old uniform for one stitched with both earth oak leaves and Varelian moon vines. Their wedding feast lasted 3 days, filled with laughter, dancing, and Lysara teaching Joran how to braid morning vines. He failed spectacularly, but she kissed him anyway. They moved into a sunlit villa nestled between the singing forests and the crystal river, where earth roses bloomed beside star blossoms. Within a year, Lysara was with child, then 2, then 3. Zephyr, their firstborn, had Joran's stubborn chin and Lysara's glowing amber eyes. Their second, Alara, could hum harmonies that made the palace crystals chime. And little Ren, the youngest, inherited his father's love of burnt toast and his mother's talent for accidental spellcasting. He once turned the royal gardener's hair rainbow-colored for a month. Joran never commanded another battle. Instead, he taught strategy at the new Interstellar Academy, while Lysara led cultural exchange initiatives, her voice now heard across galaxies. On quiet evenings, they'd sit on their terrace, watching the twin moons rise, her head on his shoulder, his hand resting on hers, no longer blistered, but lined with time and tenderness. The galaxy remained vast, and dangers still lurked in the dark. But in their corner of the cosmos, peace wasn't just a dream. It was their daily reality, built on trust, humor, and the simple joy of calling each other Cutie when no one else was listening. And so, beneath alien skies and familiar stars, they lived, not as soldier and princess, but as husband and wife, parents and partners, forever entwined in a love that healed worlds.